October 12, 1945. The Harz Mountains, Germany. The air smells of rot and rain. A perpetual, bone-aching dampness clings to the forest, turning the thick carpet of pine needles into a sodden sponge. For Corporal John Evans of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the silence is the strangest part. 5 months after VE Day, the explosive symphony of the war has faded, replaced by this whispering quiet. The only sounds are the squelch of his boots in the mud, the rhythmic clink of the canteen on his web belt, and the weary breathing of the 5 other men in his patrol. They move through the dense firs like ghosts, their olive-drab uniforms dark with moisture. The war is over, but the woods still hold secrets. Every shadow seems to conceal a threat, not of an ambush anymore, but of something more pathetic. A starving straggler, a desperate civilian, a piece of the vast human wreckage left in the wake of the Third Reich. Private First Class Miller, a kid from Chicago who's barely old enough to shave, is on point. He suddenly freezes, one hand raised. The patrol halts, the sounds of their movements ceasing instantly. Evans crouches, his M1 Garand held ready, his eyes scanning the gloom ahead. It's not a sound that stopped Miller. It's a smell, faint but unmistakable on the cold air. Wood smoke, and something else, something acrid and foul, the smell of sickness and unwashed bodies. Captain Davies, the patrol leader, moves up beside Miller, his face a mask of weary caution. He signals for them to spread out, to advance with care. They creep forward, rifles at a low ready, stepping over fallen logs slick with green moss. They find it 50 yards later, nestled in a shallow ravine, almost invisible from the trail. It is less a camp and more a wound in the earth. A handful of lean-tos, built from scavenged branches and strips of canvas, huddled together against the slope. A thin, pathetic wisp of smoke rises from a blackened fire pit, where a small pot sits over dying embers. It's a place of utter destitution, but it isn't abandoned. From the dark openings of the shelters, eyes are watching them, dozens of them. They are women, gaunt, hollow-cheeked figures in ragged clothes that might once have been uniforms, the field gray of the Wehrmacht auxiliary services. Their hair is matted, their faces smudged with dirt and despair. They look less like soldiers and more like feral creatures cornered in their den. Captain Davies lowers his Thompson submachine gun slightly. "Auf Deutsch," he calls out, his accent thick but his words clear. "Come out. We are Americans. We mean you no harm." There is no response, only the silent, collective stare. It is a stare devoid of hope, filled with a deep, bottomless contempt. These are not civilians caught in the crossfire. These are the remnants of an army, and they still carry its defiance like a shroud. One woman, taller than the rest, with pale, ice-chip eyes and blonde hair pulled back in a severe, greasy knot, steps forward. She appears to be their leader. Her uniform jacket is torn, but the ghost of an insignia is still visible on the collar. She says nothing, simply plants her feet in the mud, her chin lifted, a silent challenge. She and the others brace themselves, a huddled wall of silent misery, waiting for the violence they have been taught is inevitable. They are convinced this show of calm, this offer of peace, is just the overture to the real cruelty. Captain Davies sighs, running a hand over his helmet. "All right, Evans, Miller," he says, his voice low. "Let's get them out of there. We can't just leave them." But the women have already made their choice. They will not be moved. They will not surrender their last shred of dignity to the enemy. As the GIs take a step forward, the women link arms, their bodies forming a fragile human barricade against the cold, indifferent forest and the uniformed men who have just discovered their final, wretched hiding place. The air in the ravine grows thick with unspoken threats. Captain Davies tries again, his voice patient but strained. "We have food, water. There is a doctor at the camp." He gestures vaguely to the south, towards the world they have hidden from. "You are sick. You need help." The tall woman, the one with the defiant eyes, finally speaks. Her German is sharp, precise, like shards of glass. "We need nothing from you." She glances at the women beside her, her gaze reinforcing their resolve. They are a single entity, bound by shared fear and a bitter, lingering pride. They have survived the collapse, the frantic retreat, the chaotic disintegration of their world. They have scavenged and starved together for months, evading Soviet patrols from the east, and now, finally, cornered by Americans from the west. Goebbels' final, hysterical broadcasts still echo in their minds, prophecies of unimaginable torture and degradation at the hands of the Allied hordes. Every friendly word is a lie. Every offer of help is a trick designed to lure them into a far worse fate. Corporal Evans watches the scene unfold, his rifle held loosely in his hands. He has seen this look before. He saw it in the eyes of teenage Hitler Youth boys fighting to the death in the rebel of German cities. He saw it in the faces of SS officers just before they were executed. It is the look of someone who has nothing left to lose, who has embraced death as a final act of defiance. The other GIs are growing restless. The autumn evening is closing in fast, and the temperature is dropping. "Captain, what's the plan?" Miller whispers, shifting his weight. "We can't stand here all night." Another soldier grunts in agreement. "We should just grab him, get it over with." Captain Davies holds up a hand, silencing them. He knows that if they use force, this fragile situation will shatter. These women are brittle, starving. A physical struggle could kill one of them, and that is not a report he wants to file. This isn't the war anymore. This is supposed to be the peace. He takes a step closer. "Look," he says, trying to sound reasonable. "It is going to freeze tonight. You won't survive out here." The leader scoffs, a dry, rasping sound. "That is our concern, not yours." Then she delivers the ultimatum, her voice ringing with a chilling fanaticism that stops the Americans in their tracks. "Leave us. Let us die in the cold." The words hang in the damp air, a declaration of collective suicide. They would rather freeze to death in this miserable hole than accept help from their conquerors. They would rather choose their own end than have one forced upon them. The other women nod in silent, grim agreement. They huddle closer, a fortress of bones and rags, their eyes fixed on the Americans, daring them to commit the atrocity they so fully expect. It is a stalemate. The GIs cannot leave them, and the women will not come. The forest grows darker. The wind moans through the pines, and Corporal Evans feels a familiar knot of exhaustion tightening in his gut. This is what the end of a world looks like. Not a bang, not a whimper, but a quiet, stubborn refusal to be saved. And as he watches the proud, defiant leader, his eyes drift downward. He sees her feet, wrapped in filthy, blood-soaked rags. He sees the dark stains spreading through the makeshift bandage. And in that moment, he sees not an enemy soldier, but a human being in excruciating pain, hiding it behind a mask of pure hate.
Captain Davies is out of options. His patience has worn thin, frayed by the cold and the sheer confounding stubbornness of the women. He is about to give the order he has been dreading, the one that will turn this tense standoff into a chaotic physical struggle. "All right, men," he begins, his voice hard. "On my signal." But he never finishes the sentence. Corporal John Evans moves. He doesn't wait for an order. He acts on an impulse he doesn't fully understand himself, a feeling that rises from the deepest, most war-weary part of his soul. First, he unslings his M1 Garand. The metallic scrape of the strap against his jacket is unnaturally loud in the silence. He leans the 8-pound rifle carefully against the trunk of a pine tree. It is a gesture of profound trust, or perhaps profound foolishness. In this world, a soldier without his weapon is a target. The other GIs stare at him, confused. The German women tense, their eyes widening, certain this is the prelude to some new, unknown form of violence. Evans raises his hands, palms open and empty, showing he conceals nothing. He moves forward slowly, deliberately, his boots making soft sucking sounds in the mud. He does not look at the leader's face, at her eyes filled with venom and fear. He keeps his gaze fixed on the ground, on her feet. He stops a few paces from her, and without a word, he kneels. The act is so shocking, so utterly contrary to the dynamics of victor and vanquished, that a collective gasp ripples through the women. A conqueror does not kneel. An enemy does not show deference. He kneels in the cold, wet mud, ignoring the filth seeping into the knees of his trousers. The woman, their defiant leader, is frozen solid. Her body is a rigid pillar of disbelief. She is ready to fight, to claw, to bite, but she has no defense against this. This is not in the script she has been playing in her head. From the webbing on his belt, Evans unclips his canteen and his small canvas first aid pouch. He unscrews the cap of the canteen, the water inside a precious commodity he had been rationing for himself. He takes a sterile dressing from the pouch. Still without looking up at her face, he reaches out, his movements slow and gentle. He expects her to flinch, to kick him away, but she remains motionless, as if carved from stone. His fingers, calloused from years of handling a rifle, carefully begin to unwrap the putrid rags around her left foot. The stench of infection hits him, a sickly sweet odor of decay, but his expression doesn't change. The other women watch, their mouths agape, their defiance dissolving into sheer, uncomprehending confusion. Underneath the rags, the wound is a horrifying mess of swollen, discolored flesh and drying blood. Evans pours a small amount of water from his canteen over it, washing away the worst of the grime. The woman lets out a sharp, involuntary hiss of pain, but she does not pull away. He works with a quiet, practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound as best he can. He dusts it with the white sulfur powder from his kit, a modern miracle in this primitive place. He wraps it neatly with the clean white bandage. And then he does something more. He reaches back to the small pack on his shoulders, unfastens a buckle, and pulls out a pair of clean, thick gray wool socks. His last clean pair. He gently takes her uninjured, frostbitten right foot in his hand and slides one of the socks over it. He places the other clean sock beside her bandaged foot on the ground. He has done all this in complete silence. Now, his work finished, he finally lifts his head and looks up at her. His face is calm, his eyes holding no judgment, no pity, no triumph, just a simple, quiet acknowledgement of her humanity.
The world seems to hold its breath. The only sound is the wind sighing through the canopy of the ancient forest. Annalise, that is her name, though she has not thought of herself as anything but a soldier for years, stares down at the American kneeling before her. She sees the clean white bandage on her foot, a stark contrast to the filth all around them. She feels the impossible warmth of the dry wool sock on her other foot. She sees the soldier's face, smeared with dirt and exhaustion, his expression open and unadorned. This simple, quiet act has dismantled her entire reality. For years, she has been fed a steady diet of hatred. The enemy was a subhuman monster, a rapacious beast who would inflict unimaginable horrors. She had built a fortress around her heart with bricks of ideology, fear, and pride. She had trained herself to expect brutality, to meet cruelty with defiance, to see death as a preferable alternative to capture. She was prepared for a blow, a curse, an execution. She was not prepared for this. She was not prepared for kindness. The sheer, unexpected gentleness of his touch, the sacrifice of his own water, his own medical supplies, his last pair of clean socks. It is a language she no longer understands. It is a gesture from a world she thought had burned to ashes. This soldier did not see a Nazi fanatic, an unrepentant member of a defeated army. He saw a wound that needed cleaning. He saw a human foot that was cold. He knelt. The act of him kneeling in the mud before her, his prisoner, is the most disarming weapon she has ever faced. It bypasses all her defenses, all her indoctrination. The fortress inside her crumbles. A tremor starts deep within her chest. She tries to suppress it, to hold on to the rigid control that has kept her alive, but it is no use. A single hot tear escapes her eye and carves a clean track through the grime on her cheek. It feels like a betrayal. Then another follows. She clamps her jaw shut, but a choked sob breaks free. Her breakdown is the signal. A young woman next to her, a former radio operator no older than 20, begins to weep, her shoulders shaking silently. Soon the sound spreads through their ranks. It is not a loud, theatrical wailing. It is the sound of a dam breaking after years of unimaginable pressure. It is the sound of grief for their lost country, their lost families, their lost innocence. It is the sound of terror finally being allowed to surface. It is the sound of utter, soul-deep exhaustion. They cry for everything they have endured and everything they have lost. They are no longer a defiant unit. They are a collection of broken, starving, heartsick women, weeping in a cold forest at the end of the world. The American soldiers stand frozen, watching in stunned, awkward silence. They are trained for combat, for violence, for taking objectives. They have no training for this. Captain Davies quietly waves his men back, giving the women space. The standoff has been broken, not by an order or a threat, but by an act of quiet, unassuming grace. Annalise looks down at Corporal Evans, who is still kneeling in the mud. Her voice is a raw, broken whisper. Warum? Why?
Corporal Evans hears the single whispered German word. Warum? He looks up into Annalise's tear-streaked face, and for a moment he has no answer. Why? Because his mother had raised him to be decent? Because his platoon sergeant in basic training had taught him that a soldier's duty sometimes involved more than just fighting? Because after seeing the skeletal figures at Dachau a few months earlier, he had sworn he would never stand by and watch another human being suffer if he could help it? There are 1,000 reasons, and none of them feel adequate, so he does not try to explain. He simply gives a small, almost imperceptible shrug, a gesture that says everything and nothing. He rises slowly from the mud, his knees aching from the cold. He walks back to the pine tree and retrieves his M1 Grand, the familiar weight a strange comfort in his hands. He rejoins the other GIs, leaving a space between them and the weeping women. The emotional catharsis seems to have washed away the last of their resistance. The rigid defiance is gone, replaced by a devastating vulnerability. Annalise, using a fallen branch as a crude crutch, takes a hesitant, painful step. She does not resist when one of the American medics, seeing the situation has changed, approaches her to examine the wound more closely. One by one, the other women follow her lead. The invisible wall between them has dissolved. They are no longer captors and captives, but simply people in a cold, dark forest. The GIs move among them now, not with weapons raised, but with canteens and K-ration bars. They hand out blankets from their packs, draping them over the women's trembling shoulders. The women accept the offerings with a dazed, silent gratitude. They sip hot, bitter coffee from the soldiers' thermoses, the warmth spreading through their chilled bodies. There is little talk. The gestures are enough. The journey out of the forest is slow and arduous. The soldiers help the weakest women over fallen logs and through thick undergrowth. They arrive at a waiting deuce-and-a-half truck parked on a muddy track, its engine rumbling in the twilight. The women are helped into the canvas-covered back. They huddle together on the wooden benches, wrapped in U.S. Army blankets, no longer as a defiant block, but for simple human warmth. Corporal Evans hoists himself up onto the tailgate, letting his legs dangle as the truck lurches into motion. He watches the dark, menacing trees of the Harz Mountains recede into the gloom, feeling a profound sense of closure. He doesn't feel like a hero. He doesn't feel like a conqueror. He just feels the immense weight of the last 4 years. He thinks of his home in Dayton, Ohio, a place that feels like it exists on a different planet. Hours later, the truck rumbles into a processing center for displaced persons. It is an island of light and order in the vast darkness of occupied Germany. There are heated tents, medical stations, and the smell of hot stew. Female army nurses are waiting, their presence immediately calming. As Annalise is helped down from the truck, her bandaged foot now properly cared for, her eyes find Evans across the bustling yard. He is just another tired GI, leaning against a jeep, smoking a Chesterfield. Their eyes meet for a brief, final moment. No words are exchanged. None are needed. She gives him a slow, deliberate nod. It is a gesture of acknowledgement, of a debt that can never be repaid. In the heart of the ruins of a continent, in the bitter aftermath of the most destructive war in human history, one small, unexpected act of decency had done more than save a life. It had rescued a soul from the frozen prison of its own hatred, and reminded everyone who witnessed it that even in the deepest darkness, a flicker of humanity could still be found.